How does one go about destroying the world? To clarify, I don't mean how to destroy the Earth literally that we are currently living on. The sun is slowly accomplishing that as we encroach on the heat death of the universe. What I mean is how does one go about building a post-apocalyptic world in a fiction writing setting, theatrical or otherwise? In order to write a post-apocalyptic world, you need to craft the apocalyptic part. You need to destroy the world before you can live in the aftermath. The world as it lies in the play Somewhere, A Primer for the End of Days,
written by Marisela Orta,
does not end up the way it does with a literal humongous fungus doing nature's equivalent of a Control-Z to the human race without a tornado of consequences that starts with the flap of a metaphorical monarch butterfly's wings. It all starts with the idea of world building. World building is the process of developing a detailed and plausible fictional world for a novel and story, especially in science fiction, fantasy, video games, and in this instance, post-apocalyptic. So, what's the first and most important step to building a post-apocalyptic world? You start by not even focusing on the world at all. Instead, you start by focusing on the characters. In A. Trevenna's book, How to Destroy the World, An Author's Guide to Writing a Post-Apocalypse, they proclaim that before anything else, writing dystopian and post-apocalyptic fiction is about writing people. It's about writing characters. Absolutely everything in your story and your world building should always come back to character. They are the reason your readers stick with the story. They are the reason your readers keep turning pages. They are the reason your readers fall in love with your book and or story. You can write the most fantastic, amazing, perfect story of all time, but without characters that your readers can believe in, can root for, you have nothing. In other words, if you want to highlight the haunting beauty of your apocalyptic world and make it feel real and lived in, you need to have real people living in it. While a lot of emphasis is put on the world itself in these post-apocalyptic stories, the world is almost a character in itself, an inherently hostile entity, an antagonist who presents an obstacle to the character's very existence that they need to combat, adapt to, and overcome at the threat of death. We literally see this with the presence of the humongous fungus as an extension of the world and how it interacts with the protagonists of the show. When talking to the playwright of Somewhere, A Primer for the End of Days,
Marisela Orta,
about how she built the rapidly deteriorating world that surrounds the lives of our characters, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy, she explained how she took inspiration from the mass extinction of the dinosaurs, and a play she wrote previously about said mass extinction. She describes how the primary cause of the dinosaurs' destruction was the fact that their climate changed. That idea of climate changing also relates to climate change, who would have thought? Especially with Somewhere, A Primer for the End of Days, focusing on climate change and its possible future impacts on our world. Although it's the same words with different verb tenses, hearing climate change described like this blew my goopy brain. At its core, world building a post-apocalyptic story needs to demonstrate its characters reacting to their personal climate changing. So all that being in mind, how did I, as one of the dramaturgs for this show, take what I learned through this process to craft a public-facing project or lobby display that could enhance the incredible, well-built, and crafted world by
Marisela Orta?
Well, the second rule of world building a post-apocalyptic world unanimously seemed to be establishing a timeline and culture for the world. I wanted my project to be something news media related. The last nuggets of news our characters had access to before they went off the grid and or the news stopped entirely. I also wanted to attempt to tailor these articles toward the characters of Somewhere. For this production, director Ramon Esquivel and the designers behind the show made the choice to have the show take place in the early 1990s, 1990 to 1992 range, on the western coast of the United States. Knowing that, I dug into important historical events from this 2-year span to see if there were any major global events that I could use as a catalyst for this alternate timeline where climate change kicks off in the 1990s instead of at this rate in our current timeline 20 years from now. I wonder what... So all that being in mind, it would make sense for the characters of the show to still read newspapers. Hence, my project ended up being the last newspaper articles these characters ever read before the news went off the grid. You can find these articles plastered across the lobby for your viewing pleasure, or you can continue to look at them virtually through the QR code in the program that you've already probably clicked to get this video essay in the first place. Thank you so much for listening, and enjoy the show.